The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewing deck, each one a small light in the dark sea of space. The Odyssey, Earth's newest diplomatic transport, moved quietly through the Andara star cluster. On board were human envoys, translators, and scientists. Everyone prepared for the first official peace mission to alien territory. Captain Elias Rowan stood with his hands behind his back, gazing out at the swirl of distant suns. He was 35, tall and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being calm even when things got tense. His mission was simple on paper: represent Earth, show respect, and keep negotiations peaceful. In practice, he knew nothing in deep space was ever simple. Alongside the human ship, traveling in perfect formation, was a warship of the Vanguard. They were one of the oldest and most respected military orders in the galaxy. Known for their honor and discipline, they served as guardians for many interstellar events. Their armor was their identity. No one outside their own kind had ever seen what they looked like beneath it. When the transport docked with the Vanguard ship, for security integration, Elias was told he would be shadowed by one of their soldiers. "It's protocol," the Vanguard commander had said. Elias didn't argue. The first time he met her, she stood like a statue in the docking bay. The armor was tall, black with silver lines, shaped for movement but clearly strong enough to take a blast. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, but carried a faint trace of something almost amused. "I am Seren," she said. "I will be your escort." Elias nodded politely. Captain Elias Rowan, Earth diplomatic envoy. She tilted her head slightly, studying him through the blank visor. "Ever curious what I look like without this armor?" she asked, just like that. No hesitation, no build-up. Elias blinked. It wasn't the sort of question he had expected from a warrior of her kind. "If I say yes, will you take it off?" The pause that followed was small, but noticeable. "No," she said finally. "Then I suppose I'll save my curiosity for something that can be answered," Elias replied with a small half-smile. For a second she didn't move. Then she made a sound, soft, almost like a quiet breath of surprise. It wasn't laughter exactly, but it wasn't the cold silence he'd expected either. From that moment, Elias felt that their partnership was going to be interesting. The journey continued toward their destination, Lythus Prime, a neutral station where two alien races, the Fremen and the Theros, were set to meet. They had been at war for decades, and this peace talk was the first attempt to stop the fighting. The Vanguard were there to ensure neither side tried anything dangerous. Elias walked with Seren through the corridors of the ship. She never removed her armor, never even lifted the visor. Her voice was the only sign of the person beneath. Still, he noticed small things, how she turned her head when passing a viewport, as if she liked looking at the stars, how she always stood slightly between him and anyone approaching, a protective instinct. "So," Elias said one evening while they walked the observation deck, "do you always ask people questions like that?" "What kind of question?" Seren replied. "About the armor." "No," she said simply. "You are the first human I have guarded. I was curious how you would answer." Elias glanced at her. "And did my answer disappoint you?" She didn't respond right away. "It surprised me." That was all she said, but there was a faint shift in her tone, as though she found the surprise pleasant. The Vanguard ship was quiet most of the time, its crew efficient and disciplined. Elias noticed how the soldiers never relaxed in public, always moving with purpose. But Seren sometimes lingered when they walked past certain areas, training halls, star maps, and once a small garden chamber with plants from distant worlds. She never explained, but Elias could tell she had a mind beyond simple duty. On the third day, the fleet entered the region of space where the peace station floated. Elias reviewed the reports. Security would be tight, but there were rumors of trouble. A few intercepted transmissions hinted that someone planned to sabotage the talks. The Vanguard were aware, but their commander told Elias only what was necessary. That night, Elias stood alone in the observation deck again. Serene approached without sound. If not for her voice, he wouldn't have known she was there. "You are restless," she said. "Just thinking about tomorrow," Elias replied. "If these talks fail, it could mean another 50 years of war. For them. Maybe more." "You sound as if it is your burden," Seren observed. "It's everyone's burden," Elias said simply. There was a short silence. Then Seren spoke in that same calm, faintly amused tone as before. "Still curious about what I look like?" Elias glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Still not curious enough to make it the most important thing I know about you?" Her visor turned toward him for a moment longer than necessary. Then she walked away without another word. The next morning, the two ships approached Lithus Prime. It was a massive station, shaped like a ring with a towering central spire. Lights shimmered across its surface, and hundreds of docking bays opened to welcome arriving vessels. Elias stood beside Seren at the viewport. "First time here?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "But I have studied its schematics. If conflict comes, there are too many places for an enemy to hide." Elias nodded. "Then I guess we'll have to make sure no one gets the chance." Her visor shifted slightly toward him, and he thought, just for a moment, that there was approval in her silence. As the docking clamps locked into place and the airlock cycled, Elias felt the first stirrings of tension in his chest. This was it. The mission was about to begin. And though he barely knew her, he had the strange feeling that Seren, armor, visor, and all, would become the most unexpected part of it. The docking bay of Lithus Prime buzzed with activity. Ships of different shapes and colors floated into assigned ports. Tall alien delegates stepped out, their clothing heavy with symbols of rank. Security teams moved quickly through the crowd, scanning for threats. Captain Elias Rowan walked beside Seren, his armored escort, as they stepped onto the station. The air inside smelled faintly metallic, mixed with the sharp scent of the cleaning drones that zipped past on the floor. The peace. Conference was set to begin in 24 hours. Until then, the delegates would settle in their private quarters. Elias's room was small but well protected. 2 guards outside at all times, plus surveillance drones overhead. Seren checked the room before letting him in. She moved with quiet precision, scanning every corner. "Secure," she said at last. Elias set down his small travel case. "Does the Vanguard always work like this?" "Like what?" she asked without looking at him, careful to the point of perfection. "Perfection keeps people alive," Seren replied simply. Elias gave a small chuckle. "I'll take your word for it." The rest of the day passed in a mix of preparation and polite introductions. The Freeland delegation was tall and thin, with sharp, angular features. The Theros were broader, with scaled skin that glinted under the lights. Both sides exchanged cool greetings but didn't speak much beyond formalities. Elias made careful notes in his datapad. He was watching for anything unusual, changes in tone, body language, or even how the guards reacted. His training told him peace talks often failed because of small mistakes, not big ones. That evening, a private dinner was arranged for the human envoy and several neutral mediators. Seren stayed at the wall near the door, silent and alert. Elias noticed she rarely stood still for long. Her gaze swept the room in slow, steady movements. At one point, Elias walked over to her. "Do you ever relax?" he asked quietly. "No," Seren said without turning. "That's a shame," Elias said. "It might help you see more than just danger." Her visor tilted slightly, as if she were thinking about his words. "Danger is what I am here to see." Elias smiled faintly and returned to his seat. knowing the conversation wouldn't go further for now. Later that night, the station's power flickered. Just for a second, the lights dimmed and a faint hum ran through the walls. The guards in the hall stiffened, speaking quickly into their comms. Elias stepped to the doorway. "What's happening?" "Minor fluctuation in the station's grid," one guard said. "Likely maintenance." Seren moved past them into the corridor. "Likely is not certain," she said firmly. She returned a few minutes later. "No confirmed cause. The Vanguard will investigate further." Elias leaned against the doorway. "Think it's related to the conference?" "There are too many variables to say," Seren replied. "But if I were an enemy, I would test the station's defenses before acting." That made Elias pause. "You speak from experience." "I speak from observation," she corrected, though her tone suggested there was more to it. The next day, Elias attended the first private meeting between the two alien factions. The talks began politely, but tension rose quickly. The Fremen accused the Theros of violating border treaties. The Theros responded with their own list of grievances. Elias listened carefully, speaking only when needed. Serene stood behind him, unmoving, her presence a silent warning to anyone who might think of interrupting the proceedings with force. After the session ended, Elias stepped aside with Seren. "Feels like we're sitting on a powder keg," he murmured. "Yes," Seren said, "and the fuse has already been lit." That evening, Elias found Seren waiting for him in the observation lounge. The stars outside shone like scattered silver dust. "You spend a lot of time here," Elias said. "It allows me to see all ships entering or leaving the station," she replied. Elias walked to stand beside her. "You know, I keep wondering about something." "What is that?" Seren asked. "That question you asked me when we first met, about what you look like without the armor. Was it a test?" Seren didn't answer right away. "Perhaps," she said at last. "What were you testing for?" "Your focus," she replied. "Some people cannot look past the surface. In diplomacy, such people fail." Elias thought about that for a moment. "And did I pass?" "Yes," she said simply, "which is why I am still here." There was a pause, and then Elias said, "You know, it's not what you look like that matters. It's who you are inside." For a long moment, Seren was silent. Then she looked back out at the stars. "Most do not say that," she murmured. The following morning, Seren woke Elias early. "We have a problem," she said the moment he opened the door. "What kind of problem?" Elias asked, rubbing his eyes. "Sabotage," she replied. "Minor systems have been tampered with in 3 separate sections of the station. The Vanguard believes it is a test. Small actions meant to see how security reacts." Elias frowned. "So it's starting." "Perhaps," Seren said, "but we will be ready." Her voice carried a quiet certainty, the kind that didn't come from hope, but from experience. As they walked together toward the conference chamber, Elias realized something. Seren wasn't just guarding him because it was her duty. She was watching him as much as she was watching the crowd, as if trying to understand what kind of human he was. And strangely, he found himself doing the same with her. The second day of the peace talks began with a false sense of calm. The station's corridors hummed softly as life support systems worked in perfect rhythm. Guards stood in place. Delegates moved between chambers, and the smell of freshly cleaned air filled the halls. But Elias Rowan had been in enough tense situations to know when quiet wasn't real. It was the kind of quiet that came before something broke. Seren walked beside him as they made their way toward the central negotiation hall. Her armor glinted faintly under the station's lights. She spoke only when needed, but her scanning visor turned almost constantly, taking in every detail. "You feel it too," Elias said in a low voice. "Yes," Seren replied. "The station is too still. Movement patterns have changed since yesterday." Elias raised an eyebrow. You memorized the movement patterns? It is my duty to notice what others ignore, she said simply. Inside the hall, the delegates gathered once again. The Freylin sat on one side of the long oval table, their thin fingers resting neatly on the surface. The Tharos filled the other side, their scaled faces expressionless but their eyes sharp. For the first hour, the discussion was restrained. Mediators tried to guide both sides toward common ground, but small sparks began to show, raised voices, accusations, long silences when one side refused to answer a question. Elias took careful notes, speaking up only to calm the tone when it threatened to boil over. Seren stayed behind him, silent and unmoving, but he could feel her presence, steady and watchful. Then, just as a Tharos representative leaned forward to make a critical statement, the lights flickered. Only for a second. But Seren's head turned sharply toward the rear doors. Within minutes, a station officer whispered something urgently to the head mediator. The mediator called a brief recess. Delegates left the table murmuring among themselves. Elias moved to Seren's side. What is it? Security reports an unauthorized access in the power relay sector, she said. Isn't that the same sector that had trouble yesterday? Elias asked. Yes, Seren said. And now the breach is closer to the primary systems. Elias knew enough about space stations to understand the danger. If they take down power during the talks, it would create panic, Seren finished. Panic hides many actions, including assassination. The two left the hall quickly, joined by a pair of vanguard soldiers. The corridors leading to the power relay sector were quieter than expected. A low hum vibrated through the walls, mixed with the occasional metallic clang from distant maintenance drones. They reached a junction, when Seren suddenly lifted a hand signaling them to stop. What is it? Elias whispered, her visor tilted. Movement. Ahead. One figure. Before they could plan, a small explosion shook the corridor. The lights went out completely, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency strips along the walls. The sound of running. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Stay behind me, Seren ordered, moving forward. Elias followed, though he kept his eyes open for anything unusual. His instincts told him this wasn't random sabotage. Whoever was here had planned it for maximum disruption. They turned a corner and found the source. A figure in dark gear crouched by an open access panel, hands moving quickly over exposed. Wires! Stop! Seren's voice was sharp, commanding. The saboteur didn't hesitate. They threw a small device toward the floor. It erupted in a burst of smoke, filling the corridor with a choking haze. Elias coughed, struggling to see. Seren moved forward, her armor cutting through the smoke. He heard the sound of a brief struggle, then a loud crash as the saboteur broke free and ran. Elias sprinted after them, ignoring Seren's order to hold position. His boots pounded against the metal floor as he followed the shadow ahead. The chase ended in a narrow maintenance bay. The saboteur turned suddenly, pulling a compact energy pistol from their belt. Elias froze for a half-second, realizing he was too far from cover. A flash of motion came from his right. Seren stepped between him and the weapon just as it fired. The blast hit her side, knocking her back a step. Her armor absorbed most of the impact, but part of her helmet's side plate cracked open. Elias saw it, just for an instant. Rich teal-blue skin, smooth and faintly luminous under the emergency lights. A sharp yet elegant line of a cheekbone, and eyes, deep, intelligent, and fixed on him. She quickly adjusted her visor to cover the damage, but the moment was burned into Elias's mind. The saboteur didn't get far. Seren struck their weapon away and pinned them to the wall with efficient, practiced movements. The vanguard soldiers arrived moments later to take the prisoner into custody. Elias stepped closer to Seren. You all right? He asked. Yes, she replied, though her voice was slightly tighter than usual. You know I saw, right? He said quietly. She turned her head toward him. Did what you see change your view of me? Elias shook his head. You're still serene, armor or no armor. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she simply said, Good, and walked past him toward the hall. By the time they returned, the station's systems were being restored. The saboteur's presence was announced to the delegates as a security breach without detail. But Elias could see the unease in the room. The careful, fragile trust between the two sides was already wearing thin. As the talks resumed, Seren stayed close to him, but she didn't speak again that day. Elias could tell she was thinking, not about the mission, but about what had happened in the maintenance bay. He didn't push her. Some truths revealed themselves only when they were ready. The station's security sector was quiet now. The emergency lights dimmed back to their soft white glow. Elias Rowan followed Seren through the corridors, each step echoing slightly on the metal floor. The saboteur, a Theros operative, had been restrained and was being held in a secure chamber. Still, the danger was far from over. Why would someone try to disrupt the peace talks? Elias asked, his voice low. Seren's visor glinted under the lights. Because someone does not want peace, she said simply. There are factions within both races who profit from war. They see compromise as weakness. Elias nodded. He had read about such factions in intelligence briefings, but seeing the sabotage firsthand made it real. So this was a test? Yes, Serene confirmed. They were watching how security reacts, how delegates respond. If the talks fail under stress, blame can be assigned. Elias's eyes followed her movements. She was precise, almost mechanical, but he could feel the tension she carried. Unlike the others, she did not just see the world in threats. She calculated, anticipated, and adapted. They entered the interrogation chamber. The Theros operative sat bound to a chair, his scaled skin glinting under the harsh lights. His eyes darted nervously as Seren approached. You will answer questions, she said, her tone even yet firm. Fail to cooperate, and your next moment will be uncomfortable. The Theros swallowed. I was only following orders, he said. You do not understand. If the peace succeeds, my leaders will lose everything. Elias stepped forward. And you think sabotage will change that? The operative shrugged helplessly. It is not for me to decide. I only carry out what is required. Seren turned to Elias. This is common, she said. Soldiers obey orders, even when the outcome harms many. The human mind sees value in choice. Many other species do not. Elias frowned. So, your people. You have choice, but it is different from ours? Seren did not answer immediately. For a moment, her visor caught the light just so, and Elias remembered the teal-blue line he had glimpsed before. We have choice, she said finally. But the armor hides who we are, not our decisions, but our faces. Some lessons are learned only through action, not appearance. Elias studied her silently. There was wisdom in her words, but also something personal. He felt he had only begun to understand her. After the interrogation, the operative provided crucial information. The saboteur faction planned to attack the council chambers at the next session. They would create a diversion using the station's maintenance systems, then strike the delegates directly. Elias's stomach tightened. This is worse than I thought, he said. Yes, Seren said calmly. But not unexpected. We must prepare. The two moved quickly through the station, coordinating with Vanguard forces and human security teams. Orders were given, barricades reinforced, and surveillance cameras rechecked. Every corridor, every access hatch, every emergency exit was accounted for. Elias watched Seren in action. She directed soldiers with authority, scanning areas she had already memorized. Her visor occasionally flicked, recording and analyzing. Even with her face hidden, her presence demanded attention. Later, Elias found a quiet moment in the observation lounge. The stars outside glimmered, distant and serene. Seren joined him silently. "You do not rest much," Elias said. "I do not have the luxury," she replied. "The station is vulnerable. Any lapse can be fatal." Elias nodded, then hesitated. "Earlier, when I saw part of your face in the maintenance bay, You saw what was needed," Seren interrupted gently. "It was not my intention to reveal more." "But it mattered," Elias said. "I saw that you are more than armor, and knowing that, it makes a difference. I trust you more." Seren's visor shifted slightly, a subtle motion that could almost be interpreted as acknowledgement. "Trust is earned, Captain. And humans, you earn it differently than most species I have observed." Elias smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Her silence followed, but it was no longer cold. It was reflective, almost approving. The next morning, the council chamber was filled with delegates once again. Security was heightened, but the tension was visible. Elias noticed how the Freйлin and Theros studied each other warily, their gestures guarded. Seren stayed close to him, vigilant as ever. Elias observed her movements, noting the precision with which she scanned the room, checked doors, and subtly repositioned herself to maintain sight lines. Suddenly, a minor alarm echoed through the chamber. Maintenance drones had been tampered with, exactly as the saboteur had planned. Delegates froze, unsure of whether this was part of the negotiation or a genuine threat. Seren reacted instantly. She signaled to Elias and moved toward the source, her armor moving like liquid metal. The drones malfunctioned further, sparking small arcs of energy. She disabled one with a swift motion, dismantling the threat before it could reach the delegates. Elias followed closely, helping to guide delegates to safe zones. For a moment, he caught another glimpse of her exposed arm where the armor had cracked slightly, another hint of the person beneath. It was enough to remind him that the warrior in front of him was both alien and human in her capacity for courage. When the threat was neutralized, delegates returned to the table, tension still heavy but subdued. Elias looked at Seren. "You saved more than just the talks," he said quietly. "You saved many lives," she corrected him. "Including yours." He shook his head. "We did it together." Her visor tilted toward him, the gesture subtle but meaningful. Elias understood that, beneath the armor, there was acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. For the first time, he felt the distance between them shrink, bridged not by curiosity but by shared danger and decisive action. As the council session ended, Elias realized something profound. The Vanguard's armor was more than protection. It was a shield for identity and for trust. But in moments of crisis, actions revealed what words could not. Seren's choices, her bravery, and her willingness to act in defense of life had shown him the person behind the armor. And for Seren, Elias's calm courage, clarity of thought, and respect for her even under pressure had shown her something she had not expected. A human could see past the surface and value the being beneath without judgment or fear. The stars outside glimmered once more, distant and steady. But inside, Lythus Prime, a bond was quietly forming, one that neither race nor armor nor protocol could easily break. The day of the final council session arrived with a weight heavier than the station's gravity. The corridors of Lythus Prime were filled with security personnel, both human and Vanguard. Every doorway was monitored, every access hatch sealed. Still, the unease lingered like static in the air. Captain Elias Rowan stood beside Seren at the main council chamber entrance. Delegates from the Fremen and Theros were assembling, their faces tense but composed. The previous day's sabotage attempt had left everyone cautious, and trust hung by a fragile thread. "Are you ready?" Elias asked. Seren's armor glinted under the station lights. "I have been ready since we arrived." Elias nodded. He had come to understand that her readiness was not just training, it was instinct, honed over years of discipline and observation. Inside the chamber, the delegates sat at the oval table, their gestures cautious. The mediators began the session, trying to ease the tension. But Elias noticed subtle movements among the Theros delegation, small signals, quick glances toward doors. "They are testing again," Elias whispered. "Yes," Seren replied softly. "We must act before they do." Before anyone could react further, the lights flickered violently. A loud alarm sounded as maintenance drones swarmed erratically, some carrying small energy charges designed to disrupt the meeting. Panic threatened to erupt among the delegates. Seren moved like liquid metal. With a swift motion, she disarmed one drone and kicked another into the chamber wall, neutralizing the threat before it could harm anyone. Elias jumped into action beside her, using quick thinking rather than brute force. He guided delegates toward secure zones, calmly issuing instructions that prevented chaos. The combination of Seren's skill and Elias's clarity of mind impressed even the hardened vanguard soldiers. A shadow moved at the far side of the chamber. Elias caught it, another saboteur, attempting to strike from behind the council table. He shouted a warning and Seren intercepted, stepping into the line of fire. An energy pulse struck her armor again, but she absorbed most of it. The force staggered her slightly, and the side of her helmet cracked further, revealing a small section of her teal-blue skin. Elias glimpsed it, just enough to recognize the courage and humanity that hid beneath. "Stay close!" Seren barked. Elias rushed to her side, using his knowledge of the chamber's layout to corner the saboteur. With a coordinated effort, they forced the intruder to the floor, where vanguard soldiers restrained him quickly. Breathing heavily, Elias glanced at Seren. "You okay?" "Yes," she said, her voice firm but with a trace of exhaustion. "Are you?" "I am," he replied, though the adrenaline in his chest told him otherwise. The council chamber slowly returned to order. Delegates looked shaken but unharmed. The sabotage had been stopped, and the intruders were now securely contained. Elias and Seren stood together near the chamber doors, silently acknowledging the risk they had just faced. "Your people, they must value loyalty above all else," Elias said, watching the delegates resume their positions. "They do," Seren replied. "But sometimes courage matters more than loyalty." Elias nodded. Today it did. For the first time, Seren allowed herself a small gesture, tilting her visor toward him in a motion that suggested acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. Elias understood. Actions spoke louder than words, and both of them had just proven their worth. As the session continued, Elias noticed subtle changes. Delegates who had seemed rigid now leaned slightly forward, more willing to listen. Seren's calm presence, combined with the human ability to adapt and think under pressure, had created a ripple effect. When a heated argument began between a Fremen leader and a Theros diplomat, Elias stepped forward with careful words. He appealed to their shared history, to the cost of continued war, and to the promise of cooperation. His tone was calm, direct, and confident. Seren observed silently, ready to act if needed, but she didn't interfere. She trusted him, and that trust was repaid as delegates slowly nodded, accepting the logic of his reasoning. It was a moment that demonstrated what humans could do, not through armor or weapons, but through intellect, courage, and the ability to inspire others. Hours later, the council reached a breakthrough. Agreements were drafted, compromises made, and for the first time in decades, the Fremen and Theros negotiators shook hands. The tension that had hung over Lithus Prime since the arrival of the fleets began to lift. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He glanced at Seren, who had been quiet for most of the session, standing like a sentinel at his side. "We did it," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "but your contribution mattered as much as mine." He shook his head. "No, you saved lives, stopped attacks, and kept the delegates safe. Without you, none of this would have happened." Her visor shifted slightly toward him, and Elias thought he caught the faintest trace of a human-like smile beneath it. After the session ended, Elias and Seren walked through the now quiet corridors. The station was calm, almost peaceful. Security. Teams returned to standard patrols, and the delegates retired to their quarters, still discussing the unprecedented success of the talks. "You handled yourself well," Seren said, her voice soft. "Your focus under pressure. It is uncommon among humans I have observed." Elias laughed quietly. "Thank you, I suppose, but I could not have done it without you." "You are correct," she said. "We are stronger together." They stopped, briefly at a viewport overlooking the cluster of stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, indifferent to the struggles below, yet filled with opportunity and danger alike. Elias looked at Seren and felt a new understanding. Armor or no armor, she was remarkable, and in that moment, he realized why she had asked him the question long ago. The curiosity was never about vanity. It was about trust, understanding, and the rare bond that forms when individuals risk everything together. "Do you still wonder about my armor?" Seren asked quietly, breaking the silence. Elias smiled. "Not really. I know what matters now." Her visor tilted slightly in acknowledgement. It was a small, simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. In the quiet of space, two very different beings had proven that courage, trust, and understanding could bridge any distance, even between species. As they prepared to leave the council chamber, Elias felt a sense of hope. Humanity's place in the galaxy was more than survival. It was leadership, ingenuity, and the ability to inspire even the most disciplined and cautious allies. And Seren, for all her training and hidden identity, had seen that firsthand. The council chambers were quiet now, filled only with lingering delegates and cleaning drones. Lithus Prime felt different after the attacks and the successful negotiation. It was still a bustling station, but the air carried a sense of relief, as if the galaxy itself had breathed. Captain Elias Rowan walked beside Seren, whose armor gleamed faintly in the soft lights of the corridor. Though her helmet remained in place, Elias felt a new familiarity with her presence, one built on trust and shared danger rather than distance and protocol. "You did well," Elias said, glancing at her. "More than well. You saved lives, the talks, and perhaps the future of two species." Seren's visor shifted slightly toward him. "And you," she replied softly, "handled yourself in a way few humans could, calm, decisive, and able to inspire even those who doubt." Elias nodded. "It wasn't just me. We did it together." For the first time, Seren hesitated. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Elias caught it. "Elias, there is something I must show you," she said quietly. He looked at her, curious. "Show me?" Seren paused at the edge of the docking bay, where the stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Then, slowly, she disengaged the locks on her helmet. With a soft hiss, the armor retracted at her shoulders, revealing her face fully for the first time. Elias's eyes widened. Before him stood a being of striking elegance. Her teal-blue skin was smooth and soft under the station's light. Her eyes, deep and intelligent, reflected the stars beyond. There was strength in her features, but also a calm, natural beauty that spoke of centuries of discipline and grace. She remained still, waiting for his reaction. Elias took a careful step forward. Seren, you are remarkable. A faint smile appeared on her lips. It was the first human-like expression he had ever seen from her. You already knew in your own way, she said. I did, he admitted. It doesn't change anything. It only confirms what I already knew. That courage and loyalty come from within, not from what you hide or show. Seren tilted her head slightly, a gesture of approval. And humans, she said quietly, can see beyond what most beings cannot. That is why I asked you before. The question about my armor. Elias nodded. I understand now. It was never about curiosity for the sake of curiosity. It was about trust. Yes, she said. And you have earned it. They stood together, in silence for a few moments, watching the stars. The galaxy stretched infinitely, indifferent and magnificent. Yet within it, two species had found a moment of understanding. You know, Elias said, breaking the quiet, I never thought I'd see the day when a vanguard would reveal herself like this. Not to me, anyway. Few are allowed to, Seren admitted. Even fewer earn the right to witness it. Elias smiled faintly. I'll take the honor. For the first time, there was no distance between them. The armor had served its purpose, protection, discipline, identity, but it no longer defined her in his eyes. He saw her as she was, brave, intelligent, and capable of inspiring loyalty and trust. Do you ever regret hiding? Elias asked. Seren considered the question. No, it has kept me focused, allowed me to serve my people and others without distraction. But I also see the value of revealing oneself, of allowing others to understand who you truly are. Elias nodded. I see that too. Sometimes showing who we are can be more powerful than hiding behind fear or formality. The rest of the day was spent coordinating the final departure of delegates. The Ferelin and Thero shook hands and exchanged documents, a historic moment captured by the station's media systems. Elias observed silently, while Seren ensured that security remained flawless. As the last of the ships departed, Elias and Seren returned to the observation deck. The stars seemed brighter now, as though celebrating the peace that had been achieved. You know, Elias said, leaning on the railing, I didn't just gain a successful mission. I also gained perspective. Humans, we can make mistakes, yes, but we also can inspire, adapt, and earn trust in ways that matter. Seren's visor moved slightly, reflecting his gaze. And that is why I will remember this day, she said. Not for the armor, or the weapons, or the danger, but for the choice each of us made to act with courage and understanding. Elias smiled. It's a good lesson, one I'll carry with me. Night came on Lithus Prime, and the stars outside deepened in color. Seren stood beside Elias, her armor now partially retracted, her presence calm yet strong. You have changed my view of humans, she said quietly. You see beyond fear, beyond what others expect. You see the heart of a being and act accordingly. And you've changed my view of the vanguard, Elias replied. I thought your armor made you distant, untouchable. But it's not the armor. It's the courage, the choices, and the integrity beneath it that matters. For the first time, they stood together without formalities, without distance, without barriers. Two very different beings, united by shared danger and mutual respect. Seren finally spoke the words that had lingered since their first meeting. Ever curious what I look like without this armor? Elias chuckled softly. But it doesn't matter anymore. I know who you are. Her reaction was a quiet laugh, soft and genuine, the first sound like it had ever been unguarded. The teal-blue soldier who had once been mysterious and untouchable now stood revealed, not just in appearance, but in spirit. They watched the stars together, knowing the galaxy was vast and full of challenges. But they also knew that courage, trust, and understanding could bridge even the widest gaps between species, between strangers, and between hearts. And as the station's lights dimmed for the night, Elias and Seren stood side by side, a testament to humanity's potential in the galaxy, a blend of intellect, courage, and compassion capable of shaping the future. The armor had fallen away, but respect, trust, and connection remained, stronger than any protection in the universe.